Disabilities. She has spent more than 40 years working for disability rights and advocating for independent living and full emancipation of all people with disabilities in the U.S. and around the world. A 1993 graduate of Cora's Women in Leadership program, Ms. Starkloff has won numerous awards for her leadership in the field. She has been an event coordinator, a guest lecturer, a keynote speaker, a workshop facilitator for colleges and universities. She has worked with top 500 companies and government organizations, both statewide and nationally, including the St. Louis celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Her expertise includes numerous disability-related topics such as employment, disability history and rights, universal design, public policy, independent living, and many more subjects related to leading a full and productive life. On the 20th anniversary of the ADA, and again on the 25th anniversary, Colleen helped the Missouri History Museum bring disability rights movement exhibition to St. Louis so that thousands of visitors had the opportunity to see and learn about the history and what it is like to live with a disability. In looking back at that effort, Colleen told author Charles E. Claggett Jr., quote, "Hopefully 163,000 people will not only think more positively about disabled people, but also their role in history. We have changed the view of disability." We are proud to be able to provide this rich learning experience for our students, faculty, staff, and community. Please help St. Louis Community College at Merrimack extend a warm welcome to Colleen Starkloff.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's wonderful to be here. I consider this an honor and a great opportunity for me to be here today because I have some things I want to share with students and people who care about students about disability history, disability rights, and also your role as leaders of the future. So I first want to thank my friend Linda Nissenbaum for inviting me. I've known Linda for a very long time. She's been a very great leader in the world of access to education for students with disabilities, and I appreciate your leadership. Thank you. Thank you. Linda asked me to talk about disability history. It's a favorite subject of mine because I've lived it. My late husband, Max Starkloff, and I spent over 40 years of our lives together working on the rights of people with disabilities. And so in some of what I'm going to say today, I'll be talking about what we didn't have and how we've progressed to what we do have today so that people with disabilities can expect to live a full and productive life in the community, which is what is our passion. And I hope that I remember to tell you some of the stories at the end that have made me so proud and have given me such encouragement to continue on because our work has really been successful. Oh, I forgot the pointer. I don't have the pointer. I want to let you all know that there have been tremendous people. Some of the most influential and valuable friendships that I have in my life have been with people with disabilities who believe, as I do, that disabled people have the right to full, productive, independent lives in the community, and nothing short of that. And we don't really care what your disability is. What we care about is your emancipation. Ginny Laurie, who is on the right-hand side or the left-hand, depending on how you're looking at it. Ginny Laurie was, I always like to credit Ginny Laurie because Ginny was the one that wrote a letter to my husband, Max, when he was living in a nursing home and said, "What are you doing living in a nursing home?" And that kind of set him on his ear, like, yeah, what am I doing living in a nursing home? And he read some articles that Ginny wrote. She wrote a magazine called the Toomey J Gazette, and later called the Rehabilitation Gazette, and it was all focused on people with disabilities living productive lives, starting really with polio survivors. I met Ginny through Max and loved her, and she was one of my great mentors as I began to learn about independence and never thinking that somebody is, I think, one of the most influential women with disability in the world today. Judy works for the State Department. As a young girl with polio, she was told she couldn't go to school in the New York City public schools because of her wheelchair. She was a fire hazard, and because she needed assistance in the bathroom, and nobody wanted to help a little kid go to the bathroom because, you know, you don't help little kids go to the bathroom in schools. So she just, she went ahead, her mother was a real fighter. A lot of us have mothers who are fighters, right? And her mother encouraged her to never take no for an answer, and she never did. She graduated with a degree in special education, and she wanted to teach in the New York City schools, and they wouldn't accept her as a teacher, so she sued them, and she won. And she didn't go to teach for them, she became a disability rights advocate. She led a lot of demonstrations in the streets, and I love her. She used to tell me that she used to criticize me for the role of non-disabled people in the movement. She said, as a non-disabled person, Colleen, you have to keep quiet. Well, I didn't keep quiet, but I later realized I have a disability. I have ADHD, and I never did hold it over her head, but she did smirk when I told her, you know, Judy, I have ADHD, and she said, you know, Colin, I can tell by your behavior you've had it for a long time. When did you finally figure it out? I'm like, thanks, Judy. So anyway, some other powerhouses in the disability rights movement are Justin and Yoshiko Dart. We lost Justin in 2003, sadly. Justin, we all consider him to be the father of the ADA. His wife Yoshiko soldiers on without Justin as a real champion of disability rights. And Justin and Yoshiko, Max and I were already together, but Justin and Yoshiko have been great mentors for Max and me. And I march in the streets with Yoshiko every summer in July in Washington. We march on the Capitol, stumping for disability rights, and it's a great joy. The two of us remembering our husbands and carrying on the great work they showed us to do. Ed Roberts, the father of independent living. Ed Roberts contracted polio at age 14. Was told, his mother was told, take him home to keep him comfortable, and nothing, never be anything better than a vegetable. And Ed said, well, as he got older and began to accept who he was and own his disability, Ed said, well, if I'm going to be a vegetable, I think I'll be prickly on the outside and soft in the center where his heart was. And Ed was prickly. He led a lot of demonstrations, and what Ed did was when he got out of school, when he wanted to go to school at the University of California, Berkeley, they didn't want him there because he's on a ventilator and he used a power wheelchair and he needed attendance, and that was a big liability for the school and all yada yada yada. So he threatened to sue them, and well, they let him in. And later, and one of the things they said is, you'll never be able to have a job. It's like, well, so he said, but they let him in. And Ed later, after he graduated from college, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you the important part. He went to Voc Rehab. How many know who Voc Rehab is? Right? Okay, so California Voc Rehab. He went there in order to go to college and said he wanted to go to college, and his counselor said, no, you'll never be able to get a job, so it's not reasonable for us to spend money on you. Well, I don't remember the details, but he went to college, got a degree, came out, started the Center for Independent Living in Berkeley, the first independent living center in the world, as a disability rights organization. And when he left there, he became the commissioner for Voc Rehab for the state of California. And I said, Ed, was that counselor still working there? He goes, yeah. I said, did you say anything to him? He goes, I didn't have to. So much for that. Lex Frieden is an advocate out of Texas and continues to be a major disability rights leader today. All of us are getting older. None of us are quitting. Make a note of that. None of us are quitting. Because we love what we do. And Lex started an independent living center in Houston and has continued to advocate. And he now teaches at Baylor College of Medicine and he started a research and training center in Houston, the Independent Living Research Utilization Project, which gives a lot of information about independent living. But But all of us, all of these people, and Max and I, had great opportunities to work in independent living, disability rights, and become great friends. Martha Bristow in Illinois started Access Living in Chicago, which is one of the largest independent living centers in the world today. Martha and Max and I met each other at the Center for Independent Living in Berkeley when we were getting our money to make Paraquat, which Max and I started in 1970, into an independent living center in 1977. We were one of the first 10 federally funded independent living centers in the country. All 10 of us got $200,000 to start independent living centers, and that was a big boon for us. Independent living centers, in case you don't know, are not places where you go live. They're places where you go to learn to live independently and to define your own independence. They are controlled and staffed by a 51% majority of people with disabilities, and they're very much advocates. They advocate public policy, they advocate independence, they advocate being all you can be. So Max and I started Paraquat in St. Louis, which at the time became one of the largest independent living centers in the world. Martha and Max and I became very close friends and continue today to work in disability rights, even though I lost Max in 2010. A couple more great pioneers. Charlie Carr in Massachusetts ran an independent living center in northern Massachusetts, and then recently became the Commissioner for Vocational Rehabilitation for the state of Massachusetts. Great leader. He's on my board of directors today. He's also a great personal friend and is a very strong proponent of people with disabilities having jobs in the real world, in the corporate world. Fred Fay, we lost Fred about 3 or 4 years ago. Actually, probably in 2011, Max and I went up to see Fred at his house. Fred was a real pioneer in disability rights, founder of the American Coalition of Citizens with Disabilities, which doesn't exist anymore today, but it brought a lot of us together too. And then, of course, Max Starkloff, who I had the privilege to marry. I want to briefly tell you that I met Max when he was living in a nursing home. I was educated at St. Louis University as a physical therapist. And when I came out of school, I thought I knew everything about disability and how to help disabled people. How to help disabled people regain as much as possible of what they had lost and live a life. What kind of life? I have no idea. Am I turned over? There we go. I got the job at St. Joseph Hill, and I had heard about this guy named Max Starkloff who lived there while I was a student. My sister Mary got a job working there as an aide in the summer, and she met Max, and my sister Mary was pretty hot. I was not, but Mary was. And Max was living there, and Max asked Mary out. And Mary said she wasn't going to go out with him. And she came home, she was telling me a story about this guy named Max Starkloff, who she met at this nursing home, and I said, oh, you know, I didn't think anything of it until she said he's quadriplegic. Well, then my PT light went off, and I thought, oh, quadriplegic, that means he's skinny and has pimples and he lies in the bed all day. Because that's what I saw in the hospitals when I was doing clinicals. I didn't know anybody with a disability who really lived out in the real world. And here's this guy living in a nursing home. So he asked Mary out. Mary says, no, she won't go out with him. And I said, why not? And she said, well, because he's disabled. And I said, so? And she said, well, because if I went out with him, he might like me. And I said, so? And she said, well, then I'd have to turn him down. And I said, why? And she said, because he has a disability. That was the first conversation I ever had, and it was very spontaneous. And it later was a revelation to me about myself. The fact that I said so, I'm really proud of it. It just came out. I'm really proud of that because it made me open to finding out more about disability. And I did when I met him. And I'll tell you, the first day I was at the nursing home on the job, the outgoing physical therapist was taking me on a tour. And his name was standing in the hallway, and I'm looking at him, and I have my back to the corridor, and here comes this squeak, and I didn't know what it was, and Roger says, "Hi, Max." And this Max says, "Hi, Roger." He's coming along, I don't even see him. And he goes by, and he's in this power wheelchair, which I also had never seen. A power wheelchair, that's how little I knew. And I had a bachelor's in physical therapy. So he goes by, and his hair's all slicked back, so it's like down, about as long as mine. All slicked back, he just had it washed, but I didn't know that. I thought, oh, skinny guy. And I didn't even see his face. Goes by, and he's got this long razor hair, and I thought, well, okay. But I said to Roger, "Is that Max Starkloff?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "No." He said, "Do you know him?" And I said, "No." Next day, he wheels into my office, and he's come up here because he wants to ask one of my employees for a job. It's not for a job, sorry, for a ride into St. Louis to have lunch with his mother on Saturday. This is like Tuesday. And totally different story. There's no slick back hair. His hair is kind of lovely. It's about this long. He's got a mustache. He's got an amazing smile and wide eyes that could light up the universe. He comes in and he says, "Hi, I'm Max Starkloff." And I looked in his eyes. That was it. I was done. That was it. This was the guy for me. Just like that. So the person he asked for the ride couldn't give him a ride. And so we chit-chatted for a while. And then he wheels out to the elevator, and I'm thinking, don't be a dope. So I followed him out to the elevator, and I said, "Max, I'm not doing anything on Saturday. I'd be glad to drive you." And he said, "Great." And he gave me that fabulous smile. Changed my life. It was the first day of the rest of my life. And I'm so grateful that my sister said no. We also have local giants, although Franco is one of the national leaders. Bill Sheldon, who's a local guy, is also a national leader in the deaf community. They've made a lot of contributions. Jim Tusher, who we lost 4 months after we lost Max. Both of these guys are giants in Missouri in terms of leadership. Max went on to be a national and international disability rights leader. Jim has a lot of prominence in the national disability rights community, but definitely leading the way in independence and productivity for people with disabilities. Naomi Sewell is blind. That's her dog Farby, goes everywhere with her, and she's a very strong, also local leader. We're very proud to have these individuals. As well as Jim DeYoung, who is in Columbia with Chuck Graham. We run the ADA project, which is one of the federally funded programs that they put on a great ADA conference every year all over the country. But what's very key, and where I want to go with this, is that we need more leadership. And the young people of today are the leaders that we're counting on for the future. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about disability rights so you can understand some of the background that was laid that has changed the world, it's changed how people with disabilities live so dramatically, so dramatically. And I divided it up because I'm very proud of Missouri's contributions and how they parallel with what was going on federally. In Missouri, we were working on curb cuts, we were working on lifts on buses, we were working on housing, we did the Boulevard Apartments, we established Paraquad, one of the first 10 federally funded independent living centers in the country. We began reaching out to politicians, and back when Jimmy Carter was running for office, we got involved in politics because Justin Dart said to us, get involved in politics as if your life depends upon it, because it does. We had to change public policy. All the things that we did around housing, around buses, around education, the inclusive education advocacy was about 94-142. Do you guys know what that is? The Education of All Handicapped Children Act. And it later became the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's why students with disabilities are in regular schools and regular colleges and universities. That and 504, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. But the 1975 Education of All Handicapped Children Act was the first act that really said we need to be putting kids into regular schools so they can socialize with their non-disabled peers and grow up in a world that's for everybody, and not keep teaching these kids that because you have a disability, we're going to put you over here, we'll put all the non-disabled kids over there. That's segregation. We don't want that. We fought against that. And so it's why this college, well, 504 is why this college has an access office. But the other programs also have been very valuable in integrating students. At the same time that we were working on establishing Paraquad, we were also working, and the people that I showed you originally in the first photographs are people that we worked with to establish policy and regulations and advice on what independent living centers were going to look like. We needed federal money, so we had to establish federal policy and get money. We also worked on the accessible mass transportation. The Urban Mass Transit Association had a requirement for lifts on buses, but nobody was putting lifts on buses. So we demonstrated in the streets until we got lifts on buses. And I'll tell you, St. Louis was the first city in the country to actually have lift-equipped buses on the streets. Can I hear a little applause? Other cities had adopted policies that they would get lift-equipped buses, but we were changing over our fleet, and the bi-state bus company didn't want to buy them because they said, where are all these disabled people? They're not going to use the buses. And we're like, well, I think that's because there's no lifts on the buses. I think that may have something to do with it. So anyway, we did a lot of advocacy, and I wish I had more time to tell you more about it, but I don't. But we did get lifts on the buses, and we're very proud of that. We did 504 trainings, we amended the Rehab Act, we amended the Education of All Handicapped Children Act, and ADAPT came about. Does anybody know what ADAPT is? Some of you do. ADAPT is an organization of in-your-face disability rights advocates who do peaceful demonstrations in order to get arrested and to make a point. And in the early days, when we were all fighting for access to buses and lifts on the buses, ADAPT was chaining themselves to buses so that they couldn't pull forward and say, you know, we want to ride. And one of the statements they made was, we will ride. And they do ride now. As a matter of fact, a funny thing happened. As when we were trying to get the American Public Transit Association to adopt a policy that all bus companies all across the country would start ordering their buses with lifts on them. And so ADAPT was coming to St. Louis. And we knew the guys in ADAPT. We knew the founders, and they were our friends, and we did a lot of work with them all across the country. So Mike Augberger calls Max and he says, hey Max, we're coming to St. Louis, we're going to demonstrate because the American Public Transit Association is having a meeting downtown in St. Louis, so we're coming. Max is like, great, what can I do? He said, well, we need a good guy, bad guy strategy. You know we're going to get arrested. Max said, of course. And he said, well, you can be the good guy. You don't have to come out and get arrested. But you need to be the good guy in your town. We'll be the bad guys who come in and march down the streets. I've got a photograph from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch magazine of these guys wheeling down the middle of the street in St. Louis. So anyway, here's what happens. Shortly after Mike Augberger calls Max and says, we're coming, Clarence Harmon, who was the chief of police at that time, calls Max and says, Max, do you know about this group called DAP? Max said, yeah. He goes, well, they're coming to St. Louis. And Max said, yeah, I know. And he said, well, Max, they want to get arrested. And Max said, yeah. And the chief says, how are we going to get them to jail? The baggage are not accessible. And Max said, well, you know, we got lifts on the buses. Why don't you go talk to bi-state? So they did. The police went to bi-state. They got buses with lifts on them. That's how they took all the protesters to jail. And Max said, by the way, if you don't have accessible jail cells or ramps into the jail, you might want to think about that. So Clarence Harmon said, thanks, Max. So we were the good guys. We helped our friends get arrested so they could go to jail. And I have to tell you, we always do peaceful demonstrations. To us, changing ourselves to doors is peaceful. Now, security doesn't think it's peaceful, they don't like it. But it makes a point, if we can't get in, we have to do something dramatic. Because people don't take us seriously, right? They take women's issues seriously, they take LGBTQ issues seriously, Hispanic issues seriously, religious issues seriously. They don't take us seriously. We want to be taken seriously, but we'll do it peacefully. Because things like having to lift Jesse up the side, up on a curb because there's no curb cuts in those days was ridiculous, and we fought for it. And wheeling in the street because there's no curb cuts across the street is ridiculous, and we fought against it. Now we have curb cuts, and they're everywhere, all over the United States, and they're a comet in Europe. I saw a whole bunch of them when I was in Italy, although Italy doesn't hold a candle to us. Here's Naomi over here. This has just happened about 8 or 9 years ago. She's trying to read the braille on the bottom of that sign. Hello? Look at how high that sign is. And here's Jesse waiting at a bus stop that's not accessible. There's still, the bus company's getting better about that, but that's the way it was. And this was the only way that you could board a bus. Now they have list all the buses, every Metrolink, you can board that bus if you have a mobility disability. We're very proud of it. So I said, get involved in politics as if your life depended on it, because it does, and from the very early days we've always made friends with, or at least made acquaintances with politicians, representatives and senators, because they need to know our issues. And by the way, you can meet a president when you're so active like that. This is one of our peaceful demonstrations downtown. We were stumping for Clinton Gore in '96, and I will tell you that Clinton, under the Clinton administration, we never had such great access as we did under the Clinton administration to the White House and to the federal agencies. There were so many appointments under the Clinton administration of people with disabilities in federal jobs. And right now, the federal government is has a hiring rate of people with disabilities above 13%, which is fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. 13% of both federal employees right now are comprised of people with disabilities. That's huge. The reason that the work we've done on curb cuts and housing and buses and all these kind of things is so important is because we're the only disability rights group who has to have access, physical access. With the other groups, it's a matter of changing your attitude. With us, we need attitudinal change, but we also need to remove barriers to places where we want to go. So it's hugely important that we started out changing the built environment so that we could be part of it and not isolated from it. So in the 1980s, there were a lot of independent living centers established all across the country. Certainly in Missouri, we established what independent living would look like and established a lot of services at the centers. We established funding. We began to work with Voc Rehab to get people with disabilities independent, because Voc Rehab wants to get people into jobs. But if you're not independent, how are you going to have a job? And at the federal level, we were developing a real cross-disability. We started the National Council on Independent Living. Max was the founding president of it. We began to really work cross-disability. Cross-disability is very important. You can't just work on issues that affect the blind and expect to change the world for anybody except those who are blind, or for the deaf. People in wheelchairs, people with mental illness, people with intellectual disabilities, we're all in the same boat. We all have similar issues. We all lack access. We all lack positive attitudes toward who we are and the fact that we matter in our community and in our world. And so the cross-disability approach was very important. The other thing that we learned we had to start changing up is how we approached housing. If you design housing for people with disabilities and put grab bars and no cabinets underneath sinks, The only people who are going to live there are people with disabilities, and there's not enough of that housing. You're never going to have enough of that. But if we do universal design, and I'll show you some pictures of it, the universal design movement is gaining a lot of traction. Particularly, not only because there's 57 million Americans with disabilities, but also because there's 77 million baby boomers coming. And as we get older, we're also, the baby boomers are also these rebellious, we're the flower children of the 60s, and we don't expect to go trundling off the nursing homes. We want to age in place. We want to live in our own communities and be a part of them for as long as we possibly can. Nursing homes? No. We don't want nursing homes. But you can't stay in your own home if your own home is not accessible and you have a stroke or some other kind of a mobility disability injury or illness, and you can't go back to your house. Many people end up in institutions for that very reason. So if houses are designed to be adaptable, but they don't look like it, that's a real bonus. So we're working on that. In the 1990s, we were doing a lot of stuff. Harvard Disability Rights March and rallies are something that I was passionate about, and I started them as a was. We were having money follow the person. If we have students with disabilities in this audience, money follows the person is a very important concept for you to know about. At the national level, we got the ADA passed. You all know what the ADA is, right? Okay, I don't have to explain ADA. It's changed. It's changed not only how we live, it's changed how we expect to live. The promise of the ADA is the change in how we expect to live our lives. Very important. I can't tell you, the day the ADA was signed, we weren't in Washington that day. We sent some staff up to see the signing of the ADA. What a game changer. Really. And we're proud to have supported it. Now, of interest, a couple of things that happened under the ADA was the Olmstead decision. Does anybody know what that is? One guy, you know why. The Olmstead decision was a decision that basically said that the state of Georgia could not mandate 2 young women with intellectual disabilities to an institution. Rather, the state of Georgia had to allow those women the services and supports they need to live in the least restrictive environment, which was out in the community. That was huge. That was huge. That was huge. And now what a lot of independent living centers are doing is transitioning people out of nursing homes into the community, which means we need curb cuts, we need accessible housing, universal housing now, we need access to public transportation, we need access to jobs. And I'm getting to that. So ADAPT changed its focus to advocating for lifts on buses because we got that done, to advocating for home and community-based services. People with disabilities have the right to live in the community with the right services and supports. For many, that means attendance. Okay, so here we are marching in the streets of St. Louis and having a great time doing it. The first marching rally we ever had, 1,000 people showed up. We were blown away, but it showed how important it was that we have solidarity among ourselves and that we let the communities know that it's very important to us to march and peacefully, happily. We had a band. We were happy. We were carrying signs and we were chanting, but we were happy and marching to fix the system, not me. I love this sign this morning. Fix the system, not me. There's nothing wrong with disabled people. What's wrong is how the system and how our attitudes approach disability. That's passé. That's done. That's over. We held our t-shirt when we were in Washington, our March and Rally t-shirt. In the 2000s, the independent living centers are really focusing on deinstitutionalization of people with disabilities because there's so many people in nursing homes. We worked on Medicaid. You know, the Medicaid program, I don't know how many people in here know a lot about Medicaid, but the Medicaid program was written in the mid-60s, and it has a lot of work disincentives in it, so that if you have a significant disability and you get an SSI check and you workforce, if you earn above 300% of poverty in our state, which is about 36,500, you'll lose your attendance. Why would you go to work? You can't afford to pay your attendance if you don't have a job. We need to change that. We're working on changing it right now. Universal design, the Starkloff Disability Institute has done 5 national training conferences on universal design. Our next one is scheduled for May 10th through 12th in St. Louis. If anybody's interested, contact the Starkloff Disability Institute. And now we have a very important change in law. Do you guys know about the Rehabilitation Act of 1973? That act had Title V that had a number of sections to it. 504, Section 504, said that any entity receiving federal financial assistance must not discriminate against disabled people. So this community college set up an access office, hired people with disabilities, started providing programs and services so disabled students could come to school here. That's just one example. Museums get federal money. There's so many places that get federal money, federal grants. Okay, so they all had to become accessible, and they've been working on it. 503 dealt with federal contractors. So what's a federal contractor? Boeing gets big contracts from the federal government. Nestle Purina gets contracts from the federal government. There are thousands upon thousands of companies who do business with the federal government under a federal contract. Section 503 was in the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. It never had any regulations or any teeth until 2014. Game changer. Now, Section 503 says that if you have a contract with the federal government, we expect you to affirmatively hire, which means do your best to hire people with disabilities and include them in your workforce to the tune of 7%. The other thing it does, it says, what the ADA says, you can't ask a person if they have a disability. 503 says, if you're a federal contractor, you can ask your employees to voluntarily disclose that they have a disability. What does that mean? It means you no longer have to hide. People with ADHD don't have to hide or ADHD anymore. We can come out of the closet and say we have ADHD, which I did as soon as I realized I had it. But it allows employers to count how many people they already have in the workforce. There are quite a number of people with disabilities, and people don't want anybody to know that they have a disability, so they're hiding in plain sight. This allows them to be valued and welcomed by a corporation, and it allows the corporation to say, hey, we've got 3 or 4%, and we're going to work to get to 7. Hooray! For those of us who care about employment of people with disabilities, this is a huge game changer. This is an opportunity for all of us. And the people that are working in disability rights are all shouting for employment of people with disabilities. This is the big issue right now. Because our people are the poorest of the poor. 28% of the people who live in poverty are people with disabilities. That's got to change. And we can change it by getting people into good jobs. And we're headed in that direction. I'm going to skip over the torch relay because we're running close on time. I am proud of the fact that we were hosted by President George H.W. Bush at his home in Kennebunkport, Maine, because he signed the ADA. We gave him an award. A bunch of us did, not just Max. A bunch of us did. Okay, universal design. Here's an example of, I'm going to switch subjects on you now. This is 6 North in St. Louis. It's one of the best examples of universal design in the world. This is one way you can take these doors off and this kick plate comes off, and you can pull underneath there. You can reach the dishwasher easily. You can reach the oven easily. You can pull under the sink. You can reach these cabinets. This is a beautifully designed building, and it's winning a lot of awards. This is really a fun thing. This is a flexible countertop. See the little crank there? It enables you to raise it up and make it like a bar or a decorative piece. Make it level with the countertop so it becomes more of a workspace for doing food prep in an apartment. Or you can lower it to doors that, cabinet doors that allow head change so you can have a full under sink, and a raised dishwasher. Now, a raised dishwasher is not for people who are seated, right? Because if you're seated, oh, sorry. If you're seated, you can reach into a dishwasher that's traditionally mounted on the floor. A raised dishwasher is for people like me who got thrown from my horse and I have some broken bones in my back, and leaning over time is a real stressor. So I can stand up in this apartment and load and unload the dishwasher. Universal design thinks about everybody. Okay, so I want to move to the fact that we have had influence all over the world. We do have international history. We got involved in the Japan, or actually, Ginny Laurie, who I showed you, started in the 80s doing a post-polio conference, and she brought people who did polio from all over the world to St. Louis. And that's how we met a lot of our friends all around the world, through Ginny Laurie. As a matter of fact, we met a lot of our friends through Ginny Laurie in the United States, because Ginny was well connected to the disability community. The Japan USA conferences went from 1985 to 1993. Max was chairperson of them. It gave us close connection to two of them, the one in Tokyo Tokyo and the one in St. Louis. This was a collaboration among disability rights advocates from all over the United States and all over Japan. The Japanese had heard about our efforts to pass the ADA. They were very curious about what it was. They are just now, in 2016, expecting to get their version of what they're calling the JDA. Just now, in 2014, it's taken them long. We have had people from all over the world come and visit us to talk to us about disability rights. But the most significant thing right now is this one right here. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. What that really is, it's a way to export the Americans with Disabilities Act around the world. 140 countries have ratified the convention, which is a document. The United States has not ratified. The Congress doesn't want us to be involved in treaties. At least the part of the Congress doesn't think it's necessary. They say, well, what do we need to do that for? We already have the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the convention is based on the ADA. Well, the reason we need to do it is because countries around the world want us at the table in the UN to share with other countries how we did what we did to emancipate people with disabilities. They want us to have a voice. They want to use our example, and we need to be there. And if we can change the Congress in this next election, we're going to bring this up again because it's been voted down a couple of times. But we never give up. We just, if we think something's right, we just never give up. These are post-polio conferences. This is Japan USA, more Japan USA, Thailand came. Another thing that's happened because of the international work we've had, there have been a number of disability-focused efforts to bring world leaders in disability rights together. This was the latest one that I was a part of. I think that was in the early 2000s in Hawaii, which is a great place to have a meeting. But here's Shoji Nakanishi from Japan and Edel Bratzka from Germany. So we're stumping for the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. We say CRPD now, and this is a demonstration we had a couple years ago in St. Louis trying to get it passed. I'm going to pass on that because we have not a lot of time. What I want to focus on now is the importance of advancing. We are working at the Starkloff Disability Institute in 3 areas. We're working on disability studies, which we teach at Maryland University, because if you don't understand your history, you don't know where we've come from, you don't know how the changes have occurred, and you don't know what to protect against ever happening again. We don't ever want to go back to the days when there was not an attitude that supports accessible housing, transportation, education, all of the things that we fought for, access to health care and access to jobs. We've been fighting for all these things for 40 years. We now have the perfect foundation for this. But if you don't understand it, you don't value it, you don't appreciate why you can live your lives in a more productive and independent way, and very dedicated to sharing disability The other thing, universal design, we've got to change how we build housing so that people can live anywhere they want, not just where the developer puts accessible housing. That's what accessible housing does. It puts you in a spot and tells you stay there because there's no place else for you to go. We can get universal housing going, you can live wherever you want, and it's coming. We need home and community-based services, meaning that you can live in the community according to your own choice. And we need long-term services and supports, which is attendance services, so that you can have people to help you get bathed and dressed and help you make your decisions and out the door every day so you can have a job. We need jobs. We need to get our people into jobs. Okay. What we have done is we've been everywhere, we've talked to everybody, kind of ad nauseam, I guess we'd say. We tell our story, we get involved in politics as if our life depends on it, because it does. We don't stand on the sidelines, and I don't want you to do that either. Doesn't mean you have to be a card-carrying member of the Disability Rights Community, but don't be afraid to speak up about who you are and what you believe in. And if you don't have a disability, support us. We need support of the entire community, change attitudes toward people with disabilities. We need to accept full emancipation and independence for people with disabilities. Never give up. Now, I am so proud that the story I started to tell you about how I met Max, and the story I began to unfold here about how we've changed disability rights, is now in a book. It's called Max Starkloff and the Fight for Disability Rights. It's a great read, if I do say so myself. But it wouldn't have happened if Charles Claggett had not written it. It took him 10 years. We drove him nuts. But he wrote it, and Charlie, I'd like you to stand up and take a bow. We all do a Max Starkloff and the Disability Rights. You can buy this book as an ebook on Amazon. You can buy it as a book. I've got it sitting right over here. Charlie, will you sign it for Linda Nissenbaum? It's her book. You can also buy it on Audible. So it's in all formats, and it's a great book. And I can't say enough about how great you captured our story. And I thank you for doing it. At this point, I will entertain any questions that anybody has. Yes, please tell me your name and what's your question.
My name is Tarika.
Your name is? Tarika. Tarika, what's your question? Good question. Tarika said that I'm working on jobs for people with disabilities. Am I also working on how employers get by with paying people less than the minimum wage? Yes. Yes and yes. I was very outspoken and wrote an op-ed about the sub-minimum wage. I was also on the radio several months ago about the idea that sheltered workshops are paying people less than the minimum wage. We don't support that. There are so many options because of all that I've shown you here today to integrate people with intellectual disabilities into the mainstream workforce. There's supported employment. We didn't have that back in the day when sheltered workshops started out. And I think a lot of parents are fearful that their child can't do mainstream jobs, but how do they know if these young people keep getting shifted into sheltered workshops? The disability rights community is on board in ending sheltered workshops, sheltered employments, and sub-minimum wage. Now, the first part of your question makes me think about what we're doing at the Starkloff Disability Institute so that employers will happily welcome people with disabilities. Because of 503, the federal contractors are now interested in hiring disabled people. There are also companies who are not federal contractors who would like to hire people with disabilities because they have policies regarding diversity and inclusion. Now, typically what that means for a company is we want to see women, we want to see people of color, we want to see LGBT folks moving into the workforce and moving up in the workforce. But when you ask them about disability, they're like, oh yeah, we want to get disabled people in, but they don't know how. It's not that they don't want to do it, they just don't know how is a deaf person going to come in here and work for us when they can't hear and we can't talk to them. That's no longer true because of video phones and email and text messaging and Sorensen and interpreters. There are so many, and what I tell employers all the time, if you listen to someone's speech, and you listen long enough, you will understand them, and they will learn to understand you. I do it all the time. Every new deaf person I meet, I can't necessarily understand. We're teaching companies this. They think that if you're blind and you can't see a computer screen, how can you possibly do a job? They don't know about JAWS and Zoom text. They don't know about Braille note. They don't know what opportunities now exist. One company hired a nurse who's blind and said, who's going to walk her dog? Well, she's been walking her dog. You know, she knows how to walk her dog. But we tell the company, she'll walk her dog. She walked the dog in here. She'll walk the dog out here. But the companies, what's happening is the great thing that's happening is companies are now hiring folks with disabilities and they're saying, oh, that's not so hard. They actually like them. They get to know these people and they like them. And they're part of their teams. And then they begin to feel real good about themselves because they hired disabled people. Bravo. Go for it.
Yeah, Colleen, does Starkloff Institute have any special programs with adaptive technology now?
The question is the Starkloff Disability Institute doing anything to promote it, the use of adaptive technology in the job? Well, our staff uses adaptive technology, and what we do, and this was Charlie Claggett's bright idea, bring employers through our office and have them meet our staff and see how they use technology. We've got drag and dictate in there. We've got we've got the video phone in there, and we all use email. We don't dabble in it because other people do. There are plenty of resources to get it. What we do is communicate to employers that through adaptive technology, through accommodations, people with disabilities can be great performers on the job, no matter what the job is. And you can ask a person with a disability how they can perform on the job. That's very important. A lot of people think because you can't ask a person about their disability that you can't ask them how they can do a job. Two different questions. And we teach them that they can do that. But we rely on folks like you and all the other resources in town and all of the adaptive technology to make it happen in the workplace.
You take one more question.
As a disabled person, how do you present yourself to a potential employer with what you desire, what you need?
We have a class called the Next Big Step class. And in that class, we teach people with disabilities how to discuss your disability with an employer. Sometimes you should disclose it, sometimes you don't have to. It depends on your situation, it depends on the conversation you need to have. But if that's an issue for you or someone you know, please call the Starkloff Disability Institute. You can find us online. And we have staff who are really great at helping people understand that. Our Next Big Step class is at no charge. We raise the money for that. We're also raising scholarships to pay for it. But we teach people how to do that. Our Next Big Step class is a 12-week class, very intense, meets 2 days a week. And 80% of the people who take that class get the job they want. They go out and find the job they want. We don't place people, we empower people to find their own jobs. But a lot of people want to know, how do you discuss this question of your disability with an employer? And our answer is, it depends on the situation. But we're happy to help you or anybody else you know to answer the question in the right way for that particular person.
I know you all have lots of questions, and Colleen will be here afterwards. What I would like you to do is just join me in thanking Colleen for her time. It's an honor to have her here. Max was a very dear friend of mine. We were on the St. Louis County Commission on Disability and helped St. Louis County come into compliance with the ADA. And I had the privilege of working next to him and with him and learning from him. And so it's